advisory. Yeah, Boreal water advisory. Boreal water advisory. Boreal water advisory.
Bonjour, anin sego wabshka mikaze manitou anangwe indigenicas. In the studio here with me today, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah, Sego. Heather New Young, yes.
And this is Water School here on Smoke Signals. And we've had some very interesting things happening in the last month for sure. And there was this picture that was posted on the Water School Project Facebook page. And the girl in the picture, that's Heather, that's here with me. And that beautiful, beautiful bird that she's holding on to is, as you can see, an eagle falling out of the sky. Can you tell us, well, it's sitting in her lap now.
Yeah,
but,
it fell out of the sky into my lap.
Tell us about the eagle.
Yeah. So, okay, just for those of you who are sort of new to the format here, welcome to the Water School Project. So, my professional name is Heather Dawn Gingrich, and I am one of the world's few medical geologists. And I tell my kids that means I look after sick pet rocks. In this case, would be Mother Earth. So, if Mother Earth had a healer, a primary healthcare provider, I probably qualify for that. My training is in both, biological medicine and earth science. So, as I tell my kids, I look after sit pet rocks. But really, it's the interaction between earth materials and natural processes and health outcomes. So that is sort of the very much the sort of the Western approach. But I was fortunate enough to be raised within an Indigenous culture and had a lot of mostly Haudenosaunee teachings from my Indigenous grandparents on one side and my newly settled from Scandinavia grandparents on the other side. So my parents were both working. So lucky me, I got to just soak up the ancestors, and they shared a lot, and I put that together into my practice. So I actually sort of act as a spotter with the United Nations if there's any evidence of genocide, anything that we might want to refer up to the International Criminal Court at The Hague. They rely on people on the ground who are human rights trained, as I am, to recognize those situations and to call it in, and then also gather evidence, and where possible to just act as a messenger, as a mediator. So I got called down to Chatham-Kent, which is downriver from where we are here on the Antler Thames watershed, by a really awesome community represented by Waterwells First. And this is a situation where the weakening of our public sector institutions has led more or less directly to predatory development on a massive scale that got ushered in by the Renewable Energy Act, or the Green Energy Act. And so what has happened is that these are longtime settlers, several generations, neighbors of the Walpole Island First Nation, and they share the part of the watershed that is at the end of the Antler Thames River. But these are farmers for the most part, and so they farm pretty much conventionally, whatnot, and they are the current title holders of the land. But what has happened is through various maneuverings and mistakes and lack of oversight, they entered into what we call public-private partnerships with the local municipality, which basically means that when they put up these 700 some odd wind turbines in a migratory bird path on a really vulnerable aquifer that is underlain by Kettle Point Black Shale, that when these turbines became operational, people who had pristine, very high quality groundwater for many generations, within days of these turbines going operational, some people lost their water completely. Others, it ran black, which I believe is a fulfillment of some prophecies that we have. Others, it turned red. Others, it turned yellow. Others, I'm seeing like silica particles, like somebody sandblasted their water supply. So really what we have is a situation where Flint, Michigan meets Walkerton, and we have a chief medical officer who, rather than call the alarm and initiate the proper emergency procedures for this type of situation, as Dr. Murray McQuigg did at Walkerton. He was the chief medical officer that called in the emergency response. He's behaving more like Dr. Eden Wells down in Flint, Michigan, which, after all was said and done, ended up with criminal charges for obstruction of justice and I do believe manslaughter. So I went down there and to do a site survey because I am qualified to call that kind of thing, to say, hey, you know what, you've got a public health emergency involving your water. No, our current drinking water standards do not cover that. So if you're going strictly by the absolutely archaic, pathetic, politically motivated, immoral, illegal, infuriating to anybody who actually understands analytical chemistry, if you go by those drinking water standards, which, you know, the province of Ontario is currently taking as gospel truth, the chief medical officer, going by that standard, declared the water safe publicly, and so is inhibiting the response. So I was called in. It didn't take me very long on the ground. I did a few site assessments, and then I ended up calling Chatham-Kent Police, OPP, RCMP, National Security, my direct report at the United Nations, and the International Joint Commission sometime later. So far, we still see no response. So while we were working our way through that, I was fixing one morning, I believe it was a Wednesday, a couple of weeks ago, and Kim, you came down and you've been there.
I'm still horrified every time I think about. Heather says, "Hey, come down to Walpole." I said, "Oh yeah, I'm down there. I'm on the res. Okay, away we go."
We weren't actually in Walpole, to be clear.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, we were in. It's just outside. I mean, it was only like 10 minutes away to get to the police station that we had a meeting with. But she says, "Come down." I said, "Okay, fine." So I got the address. I turn around, jump in my car, drive down the road, get there, and I'm thinking, "Wow, what a beautiful place!" It's kind of like. Almost river type thing, and pull in, and it's like just water, and I'm thinking, oh man, what a beautiful, beautiful property. And I'm like, what am I doing here? And then I get out, and Heather's there with Chris, and she came and greeted me at the door, and I said, "Hi, how are you? My name's Kim." And I got it literally in my hand. I had a mason jar full of water that had nothing but black silt in it. I was just horrified. And this is coming out of her tap.
And that's just what you can see.
That's what you can see.
What you can't see that I experienced a couple days after when I took a bath.
Seeing it like
was the hot flashes, and feeling like I had drunk a liter of diesel from the volatile organic compounds that got into my bloodstream via my skin.
And these people were told it was safe to drink. And I'm thinking, how could anybody say that when these people have been on their lands for generations? And I'm thinking, this is just the same thing that happened to all the res people. It's happening to some of our elders that are close by, and you know, they go on, they look at life and have to laugh sometimes because you can't do much else. So, but being there was so powerful and so overwhelming that I can't believe anyone could say, hey, yes, this is safe to drink. And it was just black rock in water, and it was just so gross.
So as we were sort of, and we had a press conference.
Yeah,
and we alerted the local media.
If you want to hear the press conference, it will be aired on June 21st on Indigenous Day Radio.
Right now, hopefully that will be like a historic thing because they will have enacted some sort of response. But this one particular morning, and you know, I had been there for a few days already, And, you have to understand about the United Nations. They're ridiculously cheap. They just like second everybody. So I was already doing this work, and my only affiliation with the United Nations is, well, they publish my stuff. They publish my work. UNESCO and the Pearson Peacekeeping Center publish the articles that I write. But they're like, well, Heather, until it comes a time where we send in a peacekeeping a peacekeeping group, Romeo Dallaire, come back. You don't have to go to Rwanda. We need you in Chatham-Kent. It's just an advisory until I guess it may be the Security Council that decides to send in peacekeeping troops, which would also involve Canadians, to deal with it. And maybe we'll come to that, but hopefully not. I was fixing that day, and to be clear, we notified Walpole Island Emergency Services that there was potentially mobilization, groundwater mobilization, which would discharge eventually into the Thames River and hit them of volatile organic compounds, heavy metals, radioactive substances, and, just as the smallest courtesy one can think of and still remain human.
Yes, you did hear the word radioactive.
Yes, the Kettle Point Black Shale is you should really leave that aquifer alone. One should not disturb it. So that there are certain professionals that are employed by the municipality to respond to these kinds of emergencies. And, one of them is the medical officer of health, other water or wastewater engineers, legal counsel, accountants, planners, and police officers and police chiefs. When there's a situation like this that legitimately gets called, they have a duty to respond. And they weren't. So we were sort of like thinking about what to do that. And I said, you know what, maybe I'll just go in this morning after I get out of my jammies and have my coffee made with bottled water, not out of the tap, which I really don't like doing. But in this case was absolutely necessary. I was going to go in and see the chief medical officer and just inform him so he can't say he didn't know that he had a fiduciary duty and, in fact, a legal duty to respond appropriately. Yeah. And then I was going to go to Children's Aid Society because in these communities there were foster families that were taking in children, and the water was not safe. And in this case, like the Boil Water Advisory song, I have to say, boiling the water in this case would be absolutely the wrong thing to do, because it's not a matter of E. coli contamination or anything that's alive that boiling would be a reasonable response to. These are chemical contaminants, and so when you boil the water, you make it worse. But that is exactly what Children's Aid Society would tell you to do if you were a foster parent. And in this circumstance, you heard there was a problem with the water. We were so trained by Walkerton. It would have been the wrong thing to do in Flint as well, which is maybe why that response was so poor, because people had the wrong information about how to deal with the threat. And then I was Andrea Horwath. I cannot say enough about the NDP. She was going to be in Sarnia, and so I was just going to meet with her to give her a personal briefing. Because the NDP, maybe it's because they have so many lawyers and they're actually a little more human rights aware than the other parties seem to be, were really interested. But before I could get there, I got a call that I needed to come straight away, bring Heather to what I would call, it's a location. It's one of these caretakers of the land who's been there for several generations. And I've been doing water audits and site visits for 20 years, and I have never seen what I've seen out in this particular field. And I'd been there before, a couple days before, and the thing that really struck me, there was a real sense of place that this was the heart of the matter. And then the caretaker of the land there, he's farming conventionally right now, he showed me all of the war axe heads that he had found in the fields. And they were not made of materials that we found around here. So I'm wondering if that particular field was one of the battlegrounds of the War of 1812, which I don't think ever really ended. So Tecumseh and company, because the war chiefs came from all over. And so we seem to have evidence of that. So why this area is not declared heritage, I have no idea, and off limits to development. But what was happening is there were two male eagles, and they were doing kind of like a World War I dogfight above the ground. I wasn't there for that part, but what these do, it's a territorial dispute. And the eagles will lock talons and then play chicken with the ground. And I guess the person who pulls out, or the eagle who pulls out last, wins the territory, because by the time I got there, they're at it for quite some time, like I'd say probably almost an hour. By the time I got there, the losing eagle was being escorted out of the airspace by like 5 like little starlings or something. And there was a very large bird on the ground. You don't realize how big they are until they're not in the sky anymore, and you've got them something to compare them to. So, the caretaker of the land showed me the eagle, and I said, "Yes, that's an eagle." And they're like, "Okay, good luck." And then he hightails it back to the truck on the road. And so anyway, I'm like, okay. So, good thing I did ceremony that morning. The way that they do fence lines in this part of Chatham-Kent is it's live cedar trees. And so the eagle kind of dodged through the one medicine line, and I kind of dodged through it too. And then we began what can be best described as a dance. The eagle was it appeared to have an injured right wing. And it was sort of hopping across the field like a turkey. Like, as God is my witness, I thought turkeys could fly, like WKRP in Cincinnati kind of turkey, only with big talons and a big beak. And he had some other injuries that you could see. And so he was zigzagging across the field. And no word of a lie, there is a killdeer snipe circling overhead, apparently coaching this eagle on how to, work the broken wing thing. So, and I was circling in concentric counterclockwise circles because, I'm Haudenosaunee culture. So, we go counterclockwise. I know all your Anishinaabe people, it's just what we do. So, it's balance. It's balance in the universe.
Yes, there's a left and a right.
There needs to be balance. So I was just like singing and praying. Like, I threw every water song, every ceremonial song I had at this. And I was just getting closer and closer. And then by the time we reached the second fence line, he sort of settled down in the cedars. There's dead cedar and stuff like that. And he hissed at me. And my youngest son, Micah, does this all the time too. When he's just so overwhelmed with emotion, he cannot find language. He'll just like hiss. And I just hiss back. I was like, okay, dude, I know how you feel. So, and then I had a yellow raincoat on, and so I took it off, and he was giving me permission to kind of bundle him up and pick him up. And then, I emerged from the hedgerow, and the people they're like 50 meters away in their trucks going, "Oh my gosh, you got him." So I said, "Oh, will we call the wild bird place?" And I said, "No, we need to take him to Walpole. This bird wants to go to Walpole, because we're buddies now." So we take him to Walpole. And my friend down there, Stacy Nadi, who is an awesome powwow committee organizer, he organized the powwow last weekend at Walpole. It was pretty awesome. And he's also an addictions counselor, and he works for health services. And so I called him, and I said, "Stace, I haven't. The eagle has landed, Stacy." He was not surprised at all. And I said, "Stacy, I know you work for health services. Do you know what to do?" He says, yeah, I do. I said, "Okay, well, what do you want us to do? We'll bring him in, and we'll take it from there." So we started driving towards Walpole. It was about, 20 minutes from where we were. And along the way, this is my first mistake, or my first communication with the eagle, aside from the fact that he really wanted to go to Walpole, was I thought, "Oh, he's thirsty." And there was a bottle of Nestle's bottled water in the cup holder. And I reached for it. And let us just say the eagle said no to Nestle's. So these talons that they have are like super razor sharp, and they can generate 600 psi of force, and never mind the beak. And I have not restrained this eagle other than wrapping him in my raincoat in any way whatsoever. So I have some lovely reminders of my time with the eagle. So he got me in the left hand with his talons, and it was literally like a no. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like pulling these talons like out of my skin. He went right down to the bone. It was hilarious. Yeah. I was like, okay, fine. So then we get to we get to Walpole, and we get to Stacy, and it turns out the Canadian Raptor Conservancy. He had arranged for them to come to the powwow. They were going to do a demo. So he actually had an address and a number, and he'd called and he told them that we were bringing in an injured eagle. And at this point, I thought I had my appointments to deal with. I had a date with the medical officer and children's aid and Andrea. But then... So we go to Stacy's house and he begins to make sort of a little carrier, kind of like a little car seat, because I was thinking of sort of passing him off because, I've got a medical officer to deal with. And then the eagle, once he sort of figured out what was going on, that's when he dug his talons into the inside of my left leg, no, I want you to carry me. And at this point, I don't really have much of a choice. So after I dig those talons out of my left leg, and I've also got marks on my right forearm, like someone was taking a blood sample. He just really missed. I don't even remember what happened there. But anyway, so Stacy and he drove the getaway car. It was a black Jeep Cherokee, I think it was. We went upriver. We stopped in Moraviantown. We stopped in Chippewa, Muncie, Oneida. We were basically driving up the Tecumseh Trail to this conservancy where they were going to heal said eagle. And the eagle, the whole time, their eyes are incredible, but he's just taking this whole thing in. And the impression I got was, well, a lot lower and a lot slower than I'm used to. But, good information for the ground crews. And this fossil fuel things is bogus. That was the other thing. So, and then we got him to the conservancy, and there was a whole bunch of his buddies there. And he was communicating with them. They were they knew each other. And then what I found out later, that's a pretty amazing thing. And then as Stacy and I are driving back down to, he's going back to Walpole and I'm going back to where I was in Chatham-Kent, we're sort of listening to the radio and there's this incredible thunderstorm that runs in. And of course, Thunderstruck comes on the radio, just blasting this thing. And found out later that there was no injury to the wing at all. He just had multiple puncture wounds, was expected to make a full recovery, and was scheduled to be released. And which I thought was really interesting because, I'm very familiar with killdeer medicine because it's one of the ways that mama killdeers who lay their eggs on the shore. They lay them in the gravel. They're very well camouflaged, but of course, foxes and these kinds of things, they have good noses. So one of the things that the mama killdeer does is to lure the predator either upwind or laterally, just anywhere but downwind, really. They pretend to have a broken wing and, being kind of lazy and, predatory and opportunistic, they abandon the easy meal of the eggs and they go after the apparently injured mama killdeer. And then as soon as they get close enough, they just sort of take off and ha ha ha. But and those birds, when they hatch, they fly quickly. So as soon as they don't spend a lot of time being all cute and fuzzy but useless on the ground, killdeers or snipes is another thing that they call them. Yeah. So that's just kind of like a message, and I was really encouraged by that because as a scientist. And like I say, everybody wants to see, well, do you have any credentials? You with the United Nations? I'm no, I don't. But yeah, what are you thinking? I'm just here telling you how to not be a war criminal, because I'm going to guess that you kind of missed that lesson, however you were raised or your professional school or whatever. If you ignore me, that's fine. I will make a note of this. I make lots of notes. I have great documentation about all of the public sector systems that have been eroded, including public health, including the educational system, and including the justice system. These are so badly eroded now that we actually have, police officers acting as private security for, predatory international firms and arresting the people that are upholding the laws. That, either natural law or, the laws that we have, the laws of the land, we actually, and they're confused as to what they've done wrong.
What am I supposed to do?
Yep. So that's what's going on down in Chatham-Kent. So the thing that I would say, Chatham-Kent, it was a pleasure to work with that community. They are so well organized, and if anybody wants to get in on the fun, because it was really very high level, very well organized. If you want to learn how to do this, you want to learn how to be a water protector at a certain level in a certain way, contact Kevin Jacuback with Water Wells First. They've got a lot of great support. And so if you are a student and you want to get something that you can get credit for back at school, maybe you're having a hard time finding a job, they have really great community support, and they know what they need. They just need people to do it. And if you can bring it back to your professors and say, hey, I want to make sure this is up to the current standards. Yes, I would like to get credit for this, and I would like to get recognition for the work that I've done, because there's nothing to say you can't publish as an undergrad. I highly recommend it. And then also, especially if you're from that community, or you recognize a situation that is like the community that you came from, this is a place that can accommodate you and give you the experience that you need, which is really invaluable. And the other thing that we did while I was down there is we held press conferences, and we went to all candidates meetings. And one of the things that was super great was that from all four parties, except for the one that is currently in power. All four other parties running agreed that if elected, they would absolutely promise there would be a health hazard risk assessment. And if criminal charges were found to be pending because of what people did or what people didn't do in Chatham, that they would make sure that they were laid. So that was from everybody, all the candidates, except for the Liberals. The Liberal candidate had nothing to say. Everybody else did. And these were healthcare debates. And so we're making the link. And it was going really well. The other thing that we did is we went to a community liaison committee meeting for the North Kent wind farm. And the companies there would be Samsung out of Korea, and Pattern Energy out of out of the U.S., out of Texas. Like how many dwarfs did Snow White have?
7.
Yeah. Okay. So the 7 dwarfs now have engineering degrees, and these poor people.
They always had. They dug diamonds.
They
knew
put
what was
these
going on.
I don't know who Snow White is in this case.
Yeah,
they had 7 engineers who were just playing the plausible deniability game. But it was so much fun to watch. There was no media there at that time. But what we had there were these elders. Shout out to Lee Montgomery. Lee, he's 90 years old, took these engineers to task about professional due diligence and the things they had. These elders, they were like 70 and 80, and they were all like, they just whooped them. But they just sort of sat there impassively. I was very disgusted because I'm a scientist, but I work with technicians and engineers and mathematicians. It's called STEM. I was absolutely disgusted. And if the professional engineers of Ontario, you need to take a look at the deportment of your members in these communities, because these projects are not possible without engineers signing off on them, saying to, without technicians who have licenses. Like scientists don't have licenses. They try coming after me. So, well, you were professionally licensed. No, I'm not. I have a fiduciary duty, and I have a moral obligation, and I'm responsible for what I know. And what I know is, this is like, you guys have created a catastrophe, and you think you're going to get away with it. Well, the creator's probably not going to let that happen. But so that's the plug for Chatham-Kent.
And we'll be right back after these messages.
Yeah, boy, oh, water advisory. Boy, oh, water advisory. Boy, oh, water advisory.
And we're back after those messages from Radio Western. We're here in the studio with Heather and where this is water school. Smoke Signals goes to water school. A few weeks ago, we touched on Bala Falls with the destruction of the bedrock for a hydroelectrical dam.
Yeah, and it's the Moon River. This is Muskoka watershed. And before we move on, just back to the other fun thing about Chatham-Kent is smoke signals were actually going up from Walpole during all of this. I was like, hey, what's that? And oh yeah, that's Walpole. It's like, okay. So here we're up on the Moon River. So this is Bala Falls. So different environment entirely, different kind of watershed. Whereas the Antler Thames watershed is down in sedimentary rock, so certain types of rock type, very low elevation change. Then we go up north to the Muskoka region, and this would be the Omawaj Tribal Council. So it would be 3 Chippewas, 2 Mississaugas, and a Potawatomi.
Yeah, I believe that's what it was.
Sharing governance of the territory. So this is up in their territory. So this is more of an Anishinaabe. So we would go clockwise around if we're doing any ceremony
The
medicine.
right way.
And just so y'all know, I have done ceremony up there too on the bedrock. So this is igneous or meta-igneous rock. So totally different type of rock. So this is more like, how Kilauea down is in Hawaii is going off right now. That is also an igneous rock. It's associated with fire. Yeah. So what we have here is we have rocks that aren't like lava flow, but they're like granites. And so that means basically same kind of rock. The crystals had longer to cool down because they more slowly, gradually, cooled down and became part of the landscape. But then there's folding tectonic forces and stuff like that. So you get this really interesting banding and all that kind of thing. So it's beautiful. It's beautiful up there.
It's white rock.
Different.
That's what we refer to as white rock.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's all different kinds of colors. It's very rainbowy.
Yes, it very
different
is,
trees. So instead of Carolinian ecozone up there, you've got a lot of pine and birch trees. It's more boreal. Yeah. It's a bit of a transition, but it's more boreal forest. So the water down here, very alkaline. Very up there, it's very acidic. Very high pH, that kind of thing. Totally different types of species, totally different environments. But needless to say, again, the Green Energy Act or the Renewable Energy Act strikes again. Oh, we should also mention that the Mohawks of Wata are downriver. Yes. From this particular development where they are drilling and blasting to their little Quebecois heart's content. I have not been able to find any evidence that any of this is legal. One of the things we look for if you're drilling and blasting is that you're professionally licensed to do so in the province of Ontario. If you're not, you would be a stupid insurance company to give them insurance. And if you don't have insurance, of course, you can't operate. Now, in this case, the money is not coming from any kind of bank, TD Bank or any kind of like that. It appears to be private money coming from outside of Canada, very rich people coming to Canada looking to invest. I don't know about their motivation or what they understand about our legal requirements. But what seems to be very common, especially up in Bala, is there seems to be personal kind of political connections, sort of like an inside track where because you're such and such's, squash partner or something like that, somebody else actually did AA up in the area so that they didn't.
Somebody knows who
somebody knows something,
and
you get around the safety protocols because business hates that. Business hates being slowed down. Business hates uncertainty. If you want evidence of that, look at Kinder Morgan and Ian Anderson. The man is just begging for some sort of clarity and certainty that he's. I know I've met Ian Anderson. I've looked him straight in the face and we've talked about these things. he strikes me as someone who legitimately wants to do the right thing, wants to help his government, but the only people that he talks to are in government, and those aren't necessarily the people who are going to be most directly affected by if there's some sort of corruption of the process. So he just, he doesn't want to be a bad guy. He's a grandpa. He wants to, but he's being told all sorts of things like, well, we really want you to invest. But he's not talking to the right people. And so we have the May 31st Kinder Morgan deadline that if they can't get some guarantees out of the federal government that there won't be protests, that there won't be more violence, that they won't have, like, their international reputation won't be further trashed, that they're going to pull out. And, apparently Justin Trudeau has assured him that this will all just be fine. Wow, Justin, is all I have to say. So the thing up in Bala is I myself have personally called. There are several reasons why this they never should have gotten any kind of permit from anyone. The only permits that have been issued seem to be from the municipality themselves for land that is Crown land, which they don't have the authority to do. But apparently a lot of money was paid for these permits. So if there's some illegal activity or some fraud involved there, I don't know. But there are three really good reasons, at least three, aside from the fact, and this has to be the first thing that we talk about, that the traditional caretakers of the land and the water that know how to keep it in balance and know what the purpose of that part of the watershed is for health, they were never consulted, nor did they give consent. Okay, so there's that right off the top. Other things that should have been caught by our provincial processes or provincial federal processes, whereas the fact that it's heritage. It's a heritage site. It's a historic portage, really important. There were huge rocks with engravings on them that not only got blasted out of their place, went back to 1818, I think, or 1888. Williams Treaty, this is Williams Treaty territory, got blasted out of their place, put on a truck, and moved to another location. It's total heritage material, right? Like Canadian heritage material that got blasted out by a foreign company. It's like, well, let's just move this. This is garbage, right? This isn't our way.
This is just a rock. Let's move it.
So there's that. Okay. And so that should have been caught, but apparently didn't go through the proper environmental assessment. The other thing that should have been caught was Blanding's turtle migration pathway. That's a protected species. Peggy Peterson, while she was doing her 11-month occupation, it's got to be one of the longest idle no more. Her and her dog. Hey, Lucy. Woof. Chestnut says woof. Yeah. Lucy and Chestnut have a thing. So there's that. So that never should have been approved on that basis. Other things that the complete lack of, it's Crown land. So what happens, Peggy Peterson has to be hands down the best person I've ever met for this. She actually got into the land registry database, which went online in 2010, which basically means you no longer have to go to a land registry. If you're a lawyer and you're doing a real estate deal, you no longer have to go to the land registry office where they have people who are trained to check this stuff out to show that you have title before you transfer title, that you have legal title. Now, since 2010, lawyers can do all this from their office. And so there's these certain indicators, especially on Crown land, and a lot of these leases are coming due very shortly, within the next few years, and it just revert back to Indigenous title at that point. So, but meanwhile, there's this flurry of real estate activity trying to get it locked in and fees charged and all that kind of stuff. And it's oh, sorry, you should have known that. You don't have access. You have bricks and mortar, but you don't have access to your property. So that's kind of fun. It's called a no dealings indicator, which for these parcels was evident on the parcels that were sold to Swift River Energy Limited. And there's also, I believe, last count, $120 million in demand debentures secured to those parcels of Crown land, with no evidence of consent, even close from either the Crown or the Indigenous. So who's ripping off who here? And it, secured by the National Bank. And so in amongst this too, there's also got to be an insurance company somewhere to even cover the municipality, which is apparently in partnership. It's called a public-private partnership. They signed a deal, I think, because it's a poor municipality most of the year, except for in the summer where the Toronto people and the pretty well-heeled Toronto people go up there.
And the U.S.
And the U.S. and they all come in there,
yeah.
right? So like it's a hopping little thriving place for like 2 or 3 months of the year. But then what do you do for health services? What do you do for policing services? Well, what you do is you cut a deal with this proponent, and they say, well, we'll pay. We'll pay for policing. But here's what we ask, that your police officers, when they're not working for the public, that they work for us doing private security, wearing their uniform, using their cruisers. And this is all good. So anyway, if anybody wants to look at that, there's a group up there called Save the Bala Falls. There's a lot of stuff. It's a very divided community because some people said, oh, well, we're going to go in the front door. We're going to talk to the politicians. We're going to make them, understand that this is just not in their best interest. Of course, but you're dealing with very slick business people here, right? So all this stuff has already happened. Like I say, there's a long list of people who could go in with the proper authority and shut the whole thing down. But nobody seems to want to take responsibility for that. And I don't know why. And maybe that's something political. And I'm sure it'll shake out after the June 7th election. But again, that is something like what went wrong where. It seems to have, the environment that created a Bala. There's a lot of cold cases up there.
So someone pointed out to me that it wasn't necessarily just the dam, because there had been a dam in place years ago.
Yeah, in the South Falls. There's an island called Turtle Island in the middle. There's the South Falls and the North Falls. There had historically been a dam, a run-of-the-mill dam that, if you wanted to do hydro, if you want to do micro hydro, great. It's already set up for it.
Then a fellow said to me, he said, when we were discussing it a few months ago there, he said to me, he goes, there's already been a dam there, so what difference does it make now? Well, the difference now is they want to build a plant.
Yeah, it's a technology.
Not just a dam.
Yeah, it's not a technology.
It's a plant.
I actually, knowing what I know, I used to work for the mining industry. I don't for one second believe that microhydro is all they're doing there. No. I think they're using certain loopholes and certain incentives and certain, you're not going to be inspected like everybody else gets inspected, kind of thing. And for insurance companies that are like they're blasting there twice a day into crystalline rock, which really transmits those forces. Now, the earth does stuff. She has, a little bit of blasting, not necessarily a horrible deal. However, there's an entire community of about 500 people who live there whose foundations of their homes were really not designed up to code to handle this kind of earth shaking twice a day. And so you're going to be mobilizing radon gas into people's homes. Is this being looked at? You're releasing sediments, distant blasting chemicals. You're putting dynamite in spawning grounds and stuff like that. And those chemicals, and you're shipping it downriver to Wausau. Is anybody checking the chemistry like we also did not do down in Chatham-Kent, even though baseline studies were asked for? They were like, no, they just nobody wanted to pay for them. So that's the thing. And who would I love to see take a kicking at Bala, because they totally deserve it, would be the insurance companies. Errors and liabilities. Yeah, you guys are stupid if you continue. And I don't know. I asked. Yeah. I like at a Freedom of Information thing at the township of Muskoka Lakes, which is, around Bala. And I asked, hey, who's your insurance underwriter? Who's your insurance provider? they would not tell me who their insurance provider was, because I was going to call the company and say, hey, guys, there's something you need to understand that they didn't exactly tell you about, full disclosure kind of thing. And then I asked, oh, that's kind of interesting. I thought that maybe you want people to know that you actually do have insurance, because that's like a safe thing that, Section 19 of the Ontario Safe Drinking Water Act means if you have another Walkerton type oops with a public water supply, you sue your municipality and their insurance company that they have. So I just wanted to give them a heads up that this was coming down the pipe towards them. And they said that they were only obligated to disclose that information to the public who pays for the insurance in the due course of litigation. So like Bala's saying, maybe we'd like to talk, but we're afraid to talk. Does that mean you have a gag order? Did you, in signing up with this public-private partnership, because you had some operations budget problems? Yeah. So did you also then sign into a gag order? And if so, that is very problematic from a public safety perspective.
By all means.
Yeah. So that's Bala. So, talk to Julie Cousineau, Peggy Peterson, like anybody up there, just go up there like, hey, I'm here. What's going on?
And these are local. Well, I mean, Muskoka isn't exactly local, except that I know I've been up there, and I know I head that way all the time because the north has extensive beauty. The rock's beautiful, the trees are beautiful, the land is just incredible, filled with so many species of everything. And it's just
it's paradise.
So it is a little slice of heaven.
I'm
here
sorry,
on Earth.
it is, except
And
for now it's like a police state, and it's like Red Dawn or something like that. Or only everybody's afraid to say
now
something.
there is a picture of Bala Falls there, with like a tourist place for Bala Falls. That is actually the headline of the Water School project on. You can find that on Facebook and YouTube. That is the Facebook page has the picture of Bala, and then it has a picture also on there as a picture of Bala where they're actually put the big machinery and stuff like that for blasting. Yeah. And
Rob Stewart, the Sharkwater documentary filmmaker who passed, this was actually his last project. So he shot some footage of Bala, and then he had his accident shortly thereafter. Now, yeah.
Yeah, well, it
so,
makes you wonder.
So,
it does
yeah,
make you wonder.
yeah. I had a thought there, and I lost it. It happens quite frequently.
That's all right. That's okay.
Lots going on there, and the more eyes on that we have, like Doug Ford, Doug, he came up and he kicked off his campaign up there, and he said that, this was a scam. Yes, agreed. All a scam. Mm-hmm. And that he was going to stop it if he got elected. So, let's see what happens. Will he still work to stop this because it's a corruption of our process, even if he doesn't get elected? I would like to see that, because a lot of the people, there's, in those 2 or 3 months in the year, you have a lot of people from Toronto coming up there. They have their nice time, and then they leave again. So what are they leaving? What's their responsibility? If you're blessed enough financially to have 2 homes, and to, are you doing your due diligence? Because you know what, if you're not, you're just going to lose the privileges that you have. I mean, that's just the time that we're at now.
Well, that's there's 500 people that live there year round, and then it's 2,500 in the summer months. So that those 2,000 people or 2,000 homeowners, cottage owners up there, you're not going to see the same thing when you return this year.
No, and the most beautiful thing is the people. Yeah. And do you want people who have been enslaved, abused, intimidated? Those aren't they're happy to look after you when you come up and you tour. But I mean, is that what are we talking about here? What does that mean about our society? But I mean, something else I really want to bring up is the issue of man camps. This is a feature in both Chatham-Kent, up in Bala, and in other places that are a little more remote, like northern BC or Alberta or something like that. When you bring in men who have access to substances when they're not working and they're far from their families, and you bring them in and maybe they don't particularly care whether the community wants them or not, whether they're willing host. These are people who, have families to feed back home. What often happens is when you combine sort of this predatory development and these technologies like diamond drills and blasting, like these are fairly like violent technologies. Right.
True
and you've got
Yes,
people who this is what they do all day long. So I think that kind of changes you as a person, too. Like these are not water protectors.
Yeah.
These are people who feel it's their job to dominate and subdue the earth in fairly violent ways that if Mother Earth were actually considered a person, that would be assault very, very clearly and did not give consent. But you get these people and they come from all different walks of life and their reasons are varied, but they come in, they know they're not wanted. You put them up in a place that's really kind of isolated. They're not interacting well with the locals because the locals don't want them there. They have police protection from people trying to tell them honestly how they feel. Like, what are you doing here? Does your mother know you're here? Because
exactly.
really, if I were her, I would be ashamed of you as my son, just so you know. And I did say that to the engineers down in Chatham-Kent.
Yes, that was a
I
good
told
thing.
them that their mother sent me and that she's really upset with them. And then they have, because they're far from home and they're lonely and what they do is dangerous. And so substances are a huge part. And so what we find in these communities that host these man camps under these conditions, these are not local contractors that got hired to do this work because the local contractors told the predatory developer where to go. And that goes for legal counsel usually too. So you find that your violent crime goes up in these communities. And so not only have you wrecked the natural environment, you've done horrible things to the community, but your violent crime goes up, sexual assaults go up, thefts go up, assaults, just assaults like bar fights and stuff like that go up. Why? Because you've created a war zone for the sake of making money. And you didn't follow the proper process, and this is what you get.
And there's, a lot of things, even when you're talking about Kinder Morgan. I mean, Kinder Morgan you have the BC, which is going, no, we don't want the pipelines because of water contamination, water pollution. And then you've got Alberta who wants the pipelines because of the tar sands so that they can export. And it's like, so
those pipelines that go through Oxford County, is this the segue to talk to Oxford? Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah. Okay. So while everybody's like, look at the hand about the western route for the oil sands, very quietly and very deliberately, existing pipeline, old, degrading pipelines only last about 20 years in this part of the world in the ground.
Oh, but they have a 63-year record.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
like, okay, so if it's 63 years, it's really going to blow.
Yeah. So we're due, like Kilauea. It's like a volcano. We should not expect anything different. So they go right through. So they've been connecting. So Enbridge line 7, 8, and 9 go through southwestern Ontario, go through my groundwater dependent community. We already have evidence that pipeline is 40 years old and leaking and contaminating my drinking water, and I've got the health outcomes to prove it. Now, what we also have is a really nice smoke screen for additional predatory development. So this is where I get to hate on Toronto again. You guys are exporting your garbage. Michigan doesn't want it anymore. Adams Mine fought you off. Guess where Site C is, but not hydroelectric dam, although it's really interesting because my watershed, the South Thames subwatershed, is exactly the same shape, only smaller than the Peace River watershed for Site C. Coincidence? I think not. So anyway, so they're like, okay, we can't get people in Toronto to learn how to recycle or reduce or reuse or do anything, progressive like that. Because it's not like it's a world-class city or anything. Mm-hmm. So they want to export their garbage and they want to put it into a big limestone quarry that is dug out on top of my aquifer in Ingersoll, like where my kids go to school and all that kind of stuff. So, so one of the things that's happening there is we've been going to, it used to be called the OMB, Ontario Municipal Board. We're fighting it through that. And we're saying, hey, no, we're unwilling hosts. We don't want this. Thank you very much. And we're going to change our municipal plan to put bylaws in place so that basically we're just never going to import garbage. We're going to try not to export any of our own anymore. We're going to try to take care of our garbage here. So I have to give a shout out, just because he's been working long and hard. And I think he doesn't really care if he wins the next election. But Ernie Hardeman is our local MPP. And he has gotten the job done in Queen's Park with his private members bill saying, hi, the municipality of Oxford County doesn't really care what the province's and Walker Environmental Industries vision for the future looks like for economic development. We're home alone and we kind of like it. So, respect our right to say no, which I think is marvelous. So I don't know what reading he's at right now, but it's his private members bill and it's against predatory development and the right to say no. And who knows, like maybe if a municipality can learn to say no to, say, the province or predatory development, maybe the women in Oxford County can learn to say no. And then who knows, maybe we will uphold the right of Indigenous communities to say no.
And that is very potent in saying, that's women's issues of violence against women. Andrea Menard, thank you.
Mother Earth is,
Mother
after
Earth,
all, female.
She is. It's something we have to look after, and it's something we got to look at now. These things are happening right as we speak. And it's important that you know about these things and make kind of a good decision at where do you want to be? Do you really want to be in their shoes drinking, not drinking black water, but having to...
It's good to do. It's good. It's good to have the experience of you are not in a third world country. You are in southwestern Ontario.
It's time that, it's that time where we have to awake and make the change.
So. And I have, can I, like a shameless promotion?
Okay.
Shameless promotion, Deadpool 2.
A friend of mine, Tony, if you're listening, I know we were talking about it the other day, and actually he was laughing about it, and I said, I haven't seen it. So
yeah, it's subversive as all get out.
So Deadpool, I guess it's got to be on your radar too.
All the right messages.
Seen some hashtags about it. So
all the right messages.
Take care. This is Water School Smoke Signals signing off. Onagwahe, Bama P. Until later.